Hello everybody. So today I'm going to basically show you how existence works at the fundamental level. Okay? It's the simplest thing there is. Okay? All it is basically just a series of spheres getting infinitely smaller and infinitely larger in infinite directions. That's all it is. It's that simple. A series of spheres getting infinitely smaller and infinitely larger. Okay? It's just like Pythagoras hypothesized. Okay? But you need to understand, this is my interpretation of existence, okay? I am relatively an energy field. You are relatively an energy field, okay? You're entitled to your own decisions and your own interpretations as an energy field, okay? If you want to take any information away from this, that's fine. If not, that's your prerogative, okay? These are my interpretations of existence, and you need to understand that, okay? So, let's start with the electromagnetic spectrum, they call it, okay? I call it the information spectrum because that's what it is. It's basically where all information manifests from, okay? But the current electromagnetic spectrum they know of consists of radio waves, microwaves, infrared waves, light waves, ultraviolet waves, X-ray waves, and gamma waves, okay? Now, what's added on is that everything starts with love waves, okay? Which can be considered what's pushing everything out, okay? Basically, magnetic waves, pushing everything out, okay? And then at the end of the spectrum, the other end of the spectrum, you have entropy waves, also known as gravity waves, which are pulling everything in. Okay? Infinitely expanding, infinitely contracting. Okay? That's on the photonic level. Okay? So let's get into the next level up from that. Okay, so this is basically this is the photonic level, this is the subatomic level, okay? So the subatomic level, you have three different parts. You have the Higgs boson, photons, and gluons, okay? Higgs bosons are basically the space that separates us, okay? Photons are basically what you can see, okay? Basically, photons are infinitely expanding, like the sun, and Higgs bosons are infinitely contracting, okay? Like the space that you see whenever you look at the stars, okay? And gluons are basically conglomerations of Higgs bosons and photons, okay? Higgs bosons infinitely contracting, photons infinitely expanding, okay? So whenever you have negative infinity plus positive infinity, what do you have? 0, which is the charge of a gluon. Okay? And that's what basically makes up the Higgs field. The next level up from that, you have the electron antineutrino, the electron neutrino, the muon antineutrino, the muon neutrino, the electron, the positron, the anti-up quark, the up quark, the anti-down quark, the down quark, the tau antineutrino, the tau neutrino, the anti-strange quark, the strange quark, the anti-muon, the muon, the anti-charm, the charm, the anti-tau, the tau, the anti-bottom, the bottom, the anti-top, and the top. You'll notice each one is positive or negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, and so on, all the way down, because existence as a whole is zero. Okay? Because if you take 0 and you put it in relatively finite dimensions, it's 0. But if you take a 0 and you put it in infinite dimensions, it turns into a sphere, which is what? Infinity. Okay? It's all infinite. Everything is infinite within existence. It's all just different degrees of infinity. Okay? So, you have positive infinity plus negative infinity equals 0. And infinity is actually equal to 0 in infinite dimensions. Okay? So, let's get into an easier way of thinking how it all connects. Okay? So you have 0, 1, 2, 3, 0. Okay? And that's how it all connects. Okay? Because you have basically Higgs boson, photon, gluon. Okay? Going back to 0. Okay? Now, that's the easiest way to basically think about it. It's just 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. And it happens like that infinitely. Okay? Because, relatively speaking, matter is finite. Okay? It only has a certain amount of time that it can exist. Okay? But overall, existence is infinite. Okay? There has to be birth and there has to be death in order for things to perpetuate. Okay? To keep things moving along, there has to be birth, there has to be death. Okay? So let's get into how it all exactly kind of connects. So all these things together here, the gluon, the photon, and the Higgs boson, making up the Higgs field, make up what? Well, they make up a sphere and infinite spheres. Okay? And what is that called? Well, it's called the infinite torus. Okay? Basically, everything infinitely expanding and infinitely contracting in infinite dimensions. Okay? That's the infinite torus. And then you have different fields of time. Okay? For instance, I always say it like this: a hummingbird. A hummingbird is in a different field of time than we are, okay? A hummingbird's heartbeat is like over 1,000 times per minute. Relative to us, that's a much faster field of time than we're in. For instance, you and I right now, we're on different fields of time, okay? This, what you're watching right now, is actually a field of time in the past because I've already recorded this video, I've edited it, I've put it on the internet, so you're watching a past field of time relative to you right now, okay? And then there are the gradiuses of space, okay? Those are like the steps of space that go every which direction, okay? They're infinite. So let's get into existence and how exactly it works, okay? So like I said before, you have photons and you have Higgs bosons, okay? Basically the building blocks for gluons, okay? So all it basically is Higgs bosons becoming photons, photons becoming Higgs bosons becoming photons, and that going on infinitely. That's all that's occurring right now. Okay? For instance, the photons that are shooting out at me and you right now from this board and this wall are basically, by the time they leave this wall and this board, they're basically turning in to Higgs bosons, okay? So here you can actually see the energy field and you can touch the energy field, but after it leaves this energy field, they're becoming Higgs bosons, which hence is the Higgs field which separates the matter, which is me, and the matter, which is the wall, okay, and the board, okay? But it's all basically just an exchange of space, okay? That's all it is. Whenever you turn on your oven and your oven begins to get bright red and it puts off a lot of heat, well, that's because the electrons that are flowing in to your oven are basically feeding the photons, okay? So the photons are heating up. They're getting larger. They're getting hotter. And you can feel that heat. You can see that heat coming from your oven. But all it basically is, and I'll get into that a little bit more a little bit later, is basically an exchange of space, okay? It's basically just those electrons feeding those photons, okay? Basically, or to put it on a deeper level, we haven't talked about that yet, but it's basically those Higgs bosons feeding those photons, okay? So, yeah, so let's get into how exactly this all more or less connects, okay? So you have Higgs bosons, photons, and gluons, okay? So the next level up from the photonic level, which is this level, is basically the atomic level, okay? So Higgs bosons are the same thing as electrons. Photons are the same thing as protons. And gluons are the same thing as neutrons, okay? Electrons negatively charged, protons positively charged, and neutrons at a charge of 0, okay? Which is the same thing as gluons are, same thing as photons are, same thing Higgs bosons are, okay? And the next level up from that, you have black holes. and you have stars, and you have planets, moons, and asteroids. Okay? And all of these make up space. Okay? But they're all the same thing. All electrons is conglomerations of Higgs bosons. All black holes are conglomerations of electrons, which are conglomerations of Higgs bosons. All stars is conglomerations of protons, which are conglomerations of photons. Okay? All planets, moons, and asteroids are conglomerations of neutrons, which are conglomerations of gluons. Okay? They're all the same thing. Okay? Which is what's trippy about it. Because whenever you're looking out into space, you're actually seeing the fundamental level of the Higgs bosons, photons, and gluons. Okay? That's all you're seeing whenever you're looking out there. Okay? Because this is you. Okay? You are the fundamental particle, basically floating around a gluon, okay, which is orbiting around a photon, which is orbiting around a black hole, which is all within space, which is all within you. You are both the fundamental particle as well as the universal particle. Okay? I know it's trippy, but it's the way the string connects. It's the way it all connects. And once you can get past that, it's a beautiful thing. It's a very beautiful thing. So let's get into butane. Okay, so butane. The fossil fuel that they use for lighters and things like that. Okay, so this is what the butane molecule looks like. Okay, so this is the way they currently have chemical composition diagram set up. Okay, now it has 4 carbon atoms and 10 hydrogen atoms. But this is the way it actually looks in real life. Okay, so 1 carbon atom is equal to 6 hydrogen atoms. So you have 10 hydrogen atoms, 4 times 6 carbon atoms is 24. So it's actually 34 hydrogen atoms. Okay, I don't feel like drawing 34 hydrogen bubbles right now, but anyway, there would be 34 of those hydrogens, okay, instead of looking like this, okay, because everything is basically just a series of spheres shooting infinite directions, okay, and what are the spheres made of? Well, they're made of basically waves, okay. What are the waves made of? They're made of spheres. What are the spheres made of? They're made of waves, and that just goes on infinitely and infinitely and infinitely, okay. It's just like whenever you look at the stars and planets, moons, and asteroids that are out in space, okay. You have the sun, and then you have Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, that are basically orbiting around the sun. Okay? So, whenever you're looking at the Earth from a distance away, well, you're basically just looking at a sphere, which is a particle, okay? But whenever you get closer to the Earth, what do you see? You see infinite waves, and infinite particles, and infinite waves, and infinite particles, and infinite waves, and infinite particles. It never stops, okay? It's infinite. It's all infinite, okay? And seeing the orbits of the planets going around the sun, what are those? Those are the waves. And the actual planets themselves are the particles, okay? Hence, wave-particle duality, okay? So let's get into the different degrees of infinity, okay? For instance, I'm a different degree of infinity than your degree of infinity, okay? This bottle of water, different degree of infinity than my degree of infinity, okay? But even the degrees of infinity are infinite, okay? And you have to keep things to a practical level, okay? So we can still use this stuff to our benefit, okay? Because if you get too stuck in infinity, you'll just get lost in it all, okay? Because really, on a profound level, the way that it works is you are basically infinite energy fields, okay? Basically moving around within infinite energy fields, okay? It's all basically beyond infinite, okay? But whenever you get caught up too much in the infinite stuff, you just get lost in it, okay? You have to stay a little bit practical, okay? So, so let's get into photons and how photons are actually fed. Okay, so you have the sun, which is in space. Okay? One thing I didn't describe earlier is you have W positive bosons, W negative bosons, and Z0 bosons. Okay? So W positive bosons are basically what the photons are pushing out, okay? You can consider it kind of like the light that you see, okay? The W negative bosons are what's pulling in. Okay? The Z0 bosons are basically where relativity and quantum theory meet. Okay? So basically you have space surrounding the sun. Okay? And then you have the sun. Okay? So relative to the sun, this Higgs boson is as large as it can possibly be. Okay? Within you. Okay? So by the time the Higgs bosons get down to the horizon of the sun, they're relatively as small as they can be. Okay? Relative to the sun. Okay? And then, whenever they hit the horizon, they start to get bigger again. Okay? And that's basically what dark energy is. Okay? It's basically feeding the stars. It's basically feeding the photons, the protons, whatever you want to call them. Okay? That's what they basically have wrong with fusion. Okay? It doesn't work the way that they think that it works. They're equating fire with photons. Okay? Fire and photons are two different things. Okay? Everything that you're seeing going on right now in this existence here is infinite. Okay? Everything's happening at an infinite level. Okay? But they're equating photons with fire. Okay? Photons are on the photonic level. Fire is on the atomic level. Okay? There's a big difference. Okay? So stars are basically fed with dark energy. Okay? Fire is basically, it's fed with dark energy as well on the fundamental level, but it's basically the exchange of negative and positive energy. Okay? It's the exchange of negatively charged oxygen and positively charged carbon. Okay? So, think about it like this. Say I have a piece of metal and a piece of flint. And I have butane. Just like a lighter. Okay? Relative to the piece of flint and the piece of metal, my matter is moving infinitely fast. Okay? So whenever I do this and go ching, and I make a spark, that's because it's basically just infinity upon infinity, and it just makes a spark. Okay? It's basically just the highest degree of infinity relative to us. Okay? So what happens then? Well, then the oxygen and the carbon basically start to make a fire, okay? Which is basically pushing out infinite photons in every which direction. Infinite directions. Okay? But yeah, fire and photons are not the same thing. They work different ways, okay? One is fed with dark energy, and one is on the atomic level, okay? Two different levels, okay? So let's get into something like a medication I have a family member on. It's called atenolol, okay? It's a beta blocker, and it basically makes it so whenever you have a history of flutter or fibrillation or something like that, where the exchange of positive and negative energy can easily take place in your heart. Okay, so let me explain the way that the human body works really quick. Okay, so the older that you get, the more and more matter that collects. Okay, so your tissue begins to build up in your heart. Okay, so the way that your heart works is it's hooked up in parallel. Okay, so all the blood vessels of the heart basically have, there's one side of the heart that has positively charged carbon dioxygenated blood, and and there's other side has negatively charged oxygenated blood. Okay, so think about a lightning storm. Okay, so whenever you have positive and negative energy running against the walls of the blood vessels meeting up, what does that cause? It causes like an infinite lightning storm, which causes your heart to pump, 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 pump. Okay, that's how it works. Okay, so whenever I'm basically breathing in the oxygenated air, it's basically making my blood a negative charge. Okay, so the blood that's already in me, that's positively charged, there's basically an exchange of positive and negative energy causing that pa-pump, 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 which is what perpetuates you, keeps you going, is your heart pumping the blood. Okay, so kind of losing my train of thought there. But yeah, I mean that's all that it basically is basically just exchange of positive and negative energy. Okay, that's how everything works. It's basically just an exchange of positive and negative energy. Okay, just an exchange of space. Okay, so where was I going with that? Oh yeah, so after time, your tissue, your matter builds up in your heart. Okay, so it makes it harder for that exchange of energy to take place. So you start to develop problems, like you start to develop atrial flutter, atrial fibrillation, heart failure, different things like that, because the tissue builds up so much in your heart that it can no longer have an easy exchange of positive and negative energy within it. Okay? Okay, so like a medication, like a helps it pump more efficiently. Okay, it's called a beta blocker, but I postulate the way that it works is atenolol. It's actually made with (14) carbon atoms, 22 hydrogen atoms, 2 nitrogen atoms, and 3 oxygen atoms. Which, if you add up all those, that's basically 144 hydrogen atoms. Okay? So, I think that on a fundamental level, all that you're doing whenever you're taking that atenolol is basically you're just hypercharging your system with a lot more dark energy. Okay? And it allows you to function longer. Okay? That's all that it is. It's that simple. Okay? All it is basically just compensation of string that's going faster and string that's going slower. Okay? So I went over this on other videos, but okay, so say you eat magic mushrooms. Well, relative to us, plants that are still a part of the earth are on a much slower field of time. So what happens? So you eat that mushroom, it goes into you, and that string is going relatively slow relative to your string. So what does your string do? Well, your string compensates by speeding up. And that's why you kind of start seeing all kinds of crazy stuff, because your string is compensating by speeding up to try to balance out the slower string that's in your system. Okay? It's the same thing with alcohol. Okay? Whenever you drink alcohol, alcohol comes from yeast, which is a multi-cell organism. So relative to us, its field of time is much faster. Okay? So whenever you basically ingest that alcohol, that string is traveling a lot faster relative to your string. Okay? So what does your string do to compensate? Well, it slows down, which is why when you're drunk, you get like this, you know, because you're slower, because your string is compensating. Okay? It's all a very beautiful thing. I mean, it's really simple. Okay? So I think I've pretty much covered most of the stuff that I wanted to cover today. Okay? But looking at things from a fundamental level, what does all this mean? Okay? Well, it means that relative to you, you are the universe. Okay? Relative to you. Because you are both the fundamental particle as well as the universal particle. Okay? You're everywhere. You're everything. Okay? Relative to you, you are the universe. Okay? So, what does that necessarily mean? Well, relative to you, if you're everything, that means that you're God. And that means that I am God. And that everything is God. That we are all God. Okay? And you might ask, well, isn't that pantheism? It depends on your interpretation of existence. I more or less go with pantheism because I believe that while I am God, everything that is not me is God as well. So I more or less subscribe to pantheism instead of pantheism. Okay? But it's a beautiful thing. It's a very beautiful thing. But yeah, that's about it. Once you start to really put it all together, I mean, it's pretty simple. There's certain things that, like for instance, the string, whenever I was tracing it out a while ago, showing it to you, there's certain things like the W bosons and the Z bosons are right. The size, the electron volt size, is right after the bottom quark and right before the anti-top quark. Okay? So the reason for that is because it's not like we can just get a telescope and look at this stuff. Okay? It's so small relative to us that all we can do is basically do mathematics to try to figure this stuff out. Okay? So, basically, every level, okay? Every level between the Higgs boson, the photon, the gluon, the electron antineutrino, the electron neutrino, all those things, basically every level that separates those are Z0 bosons, okay? And they're either shooting out W positive bosons or pulling in W negative bosons, okay? So that's all it is, though. I mean, it's pretty simple. Just a series of spheres getting infinitely smaller and infinitely larger. They consist of both particles and waves infinitely. It's all infinite. It's all infinite, and it's beautiful. So I'm not really gonna postulate what happens after death or anything in this video. I've talked about that in other videos. For a long time, scientists have basically stated that, you know, science points towards it just being black after you die and everything like that. I really don't think that it does. I think that it more or less points towards life moves on after you die, okay? Because that's one thing that I was wanting to get into was the speed of light, okay? So the speed of light is approximately 300 million meters per second, okay? Depending on what it's traveling through, okay? The compound that it's traveling through, okay? So whenever they did the double slit experiment, and they did it without measuring it, you might have to look it up, okay, to know what I'm talking about. But whenever they first measured it, basically on the board, they found that everything was basically gathering in a wave formation, okay? And whenever they went to measure it, it changed. And things started gathering in a particle formation. And that kind of threw them for a loop. They didn't know what that was. But they actually, they didn't realize it, but they'd actually proved that everything is infinite doing that experiment. And why is that? Well, that's because, relatively speaking, you are the universe relative to you. So whenever you start to measure things, relativity kicks in. Okay? So naturally, everything is infinite. Whenever you start to make measurements, relativity kicks in. Hence, 300 million meters per second. Okay? And they might as well just make it 300 million meters per second is the speed of light, because 0, 1, 2, 3, 0. Okay? And that's all it is. Just 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, infinitely. Okay? So it just makes things easier that way, just to consider it 300 million meters per second. But yeah, that's pretty much all it is to it. You have any questions or anything like that, write them in the comments. Remember, this is my interpretation of existence. If you disagree with my interpretation of existence, that's your prerogative, okay? You have your interpretation of existence. I have my interpretation of existence, okay? We're both relatively different energy fields, okay? But we're both relatively infinite. So anyway, I have a GoFundMe page, Magnitis Toys, Magnitis Toys. If you want to contribute to that, if not, that's fine. I just really appreciate your time, and If you want to know what if you want to know what it looks like to see the stars above us moving around at infinite speeds, you're seeing it right now. 'Cause that's what I am. Infinite stars, black holes, planets, moons, asteroids, and space. It's a beautiful thing. So, and it's all infinite. So, thank you for watching. I appreciate it.